In the glittering heart of Aethelred Global, where power was measured in billion-dollar deals, Elena Ramirez was an almost invisible whisper, a diligent cleaner polishing away the day's debris. But one crisp morning, a sound utterly unexpected sliced through the corporate hum. Elena's voice, a flawless cascade of Mandarin, then Spanish, then French, effortlessly guiding lost visitors. The CEO, Marcus Thorne, heard it, and the discovery of this linguistic prodigy in a janitor's uniform sent an electrifying shockwave through the entire company. This is the astounding story of how one overlooked woman, armed with a mop and a mind fluent in 9 tongues, didn't just find a new office, but ignited a corporate awakening, proving that brilliance often hides in the most unexpected places. Prepare to witness the moment that changed everything. The Monday morning symphony of Aethelred Global's expansive lobby was in full percussive swing. Sunlight, fractured by the towering glass facade of the downtown Austin skyscraper, danced across the polished Italian marble. The air thrummed with the sharp clack of heels, the murmur of hushed, urgent conversations, the incessant tap-tap-tapping of fingers on glowing screens. It was the usual overture to a week of high-stakes deals and relentless innovation, a familiar soundscape that usually faded into white noise for most. The cleaning crew, the nocturnal guardians of Aethelred's gleam, were phantoms by this hour. They moved in the pre-dawn shadows, their existence acknowledged only by the pristine surfaces they left behind, silent, efficient, and largely invisible. It wasn't malice that rendered them so. It was the ingrained habit of a corporate world perpetually looking upwards, rarely sideways, and almost never down. Marcus Thorne, Aethelred's formidable CEO, a man whose silver-streaked hair and bespoke suits whispered of authority earned through decades of navigating treacherous global markets, was making his customary journey from the executive parking garage to his penthouse office on the 50th floor. He was a creature of habit, his mind already parsing through the day's agenda. A critical merger call with Tokyo, a tense negotiation with a German tech supplier, a strategy session for the new South American expansion. Coffee, black and potent, was clutched in his hand like a scepter. He was halfway across the vast atrium, nodding curtly to a passing department head, when a sound sliced through the ambient hum, arresting him mid-stride. It was a voice, female, clear, and imbued with an effortless confidence. But it wasn't the quality that snagged his attention. It was the language, fluent, idiomatic Mandarin, lilting and precise, a linguistic melody he hadn't heard with such authenticity since his last grueling negotiation in Beijing. Marcus paused, a flicker of surprise crossing his usually impassive features. He scanned the bustling lobby, expecting to see Isabella Rossi, their head of Asian markets, perhaps in early for a meeting. But Isabella was famously not a morning person. Then his gaze settled on a figure near the interactive lobby directory, a place often frequented by bewildered first-time visitors. She was a woman, perhaps in her late 40s, dressed in the deep teal uniform of Aethelred's maintenance staff. Her dark curly hair was pulled back in a neat, practical bun at the nape of her neck. She was speaking animatedly to an elderly Asian gentleman who looked utterly lost a moment ago, but now wore an expression of dawning comprehension and immense relief. Her hands moved with graceful emphasis as she spoke, her voice warm, yet carrying an undeniable note of calm authority, patiently guiding him towards the elevator bank. Marcus Thorne prided himself on his attention to detail. He'd seen this woman before, a fleeting presence in the periphery of his late-night departures from the office. Always a polite, almost imperceptible nod if their paths crossed. Always engrossed in her work. Her movements economical and focused. He didn't know her name. He wouldn't have been able to pick her out of a lineup of the cleaning staff if his life depended on it. And yet, here she was, navigating the complexities of a major corporate building's layout in flawless Mandarin, a language that tripped up even seasoned diplomats. He took a slow, deliberate step closer, curiosity now a tangible force. As he approached, she concluded her conversation in Mandarin with a reassuring smile. The elderly gentleman bowed gratefully before heading towards the elevators. Then, without missing a beat, she turned to a frazzled-looking delivery driver wrestling with a teetering stack of boxes and a smudged clipboard. "¿Necesita ayuda con eso?" "¿A qué piso va?" she asked, her Spanish as smooth and natural as a river stone, the subtle cadence hinting at a Castilian influence. The delivery driver, who had been muttering curses under his breath, blinked in surprise. "Sí, por favor. Al 32 para la señora. Dubois. Gracias. Muchas gracias." Just as casually, almost as an afterthought, she addressed a young man in a courier uniform nearby who was frowning at a clearly misaddressed package destined for a conference room. "Excusez-moi, monsieur. La salle de conférence B se trouve au 4e étage, par l'ascenseur de service. C'est plus rapide." Her French was impeccable, the pronunciation crisp, the intonation perfect. She offered a small, helpful smile and a discreet point. Marcus Thorne felt his jaw tighten, not in anger, but with a strange, unfamiliar pressure in his chest. It was a cocktail of disbelief, a dash of professional embarrassment, and a growing sense of profound intrigue. He, Marcus Thorne, who had spearheaded Aethelred's global expansion, who had personally vetted and hired legions of translators, who had sunk millions into cross-cultural training programs, was witnessing a linguistic virtuoso scrubbing floors just 3 levels below his opulent office. The irony was as sharp as it was undeniable. He stepped forward, his voice, when he finally found it, a little huskier than usual. "Excuse me?" The woman turned, a flicker of surprise in her intelligent, dark eyes, but her composure remained absolute. "Yes, sir." Her voice was respectful, neutral. A faint, almost incredulous smile touched Marcus's lips. "That was Mandarin, wasn't it?" "Yes, sir, it was." "And you speak it fluently?" It wasn't a question, but a statement of dawning realization. "I do, sir." "And Spanish and French." She nodded, a simple, unpretentious acknowledgement. "And Portuguese, German, Italian, a little Arabic, and some Swahili from a volunteer project years ago. I can also read classical Latin, though I suppose that doesn't really count in a practical sense." Marcus Thorne blinked, once, twice. He felt as though the meticulously ordered world of his executive brain had just been hit by a rogue data packet. "You're telling me you speak 9 languages?" "Yes, sir." There was no trace of arrogance in her tone, no hint of boasting. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same quiet efficiency she probably used to describe the pH balance of a cleaning solution. He stared at her, the sounds of the lobby fading into a distant murmur. He was trying to reconcile the image of the woman who polished the brass fittings on the executive floor with this polyglot, this walking, talking United Nations assembly. "What's your name?" he asked, the question feeling ridiculously overdue. Elena Ramirez, sir." "Ms. Ramirez," he said, the formality feeling oddly appropriate now. "Are you perhaps free for a few minutes, right now?" Her eyebrows, finely arched, rose a fraction. "Now, sir?" "Yes, I'd like to talk to you, in my office." He saw a ghost of hesitation in her eyes, not fear, but the ingrained caution of someone accustomed to being on the periphery, someone for whom a summons to the CEO's office was an event outside the known universe. She gave a slow, deliberate nod. "All right, sir." Marcus pressed the elevator call button, the express lift to the executive floors. He held the door for her as she stepped inside, her movement still marked by a quiet grace. The polished steel doors slid shut, encasing them in a sudden, heavy silence. As the elevator ascended with a smooth, almost imperceptible hum, Elena spoke, her voice soft but clear. "I've worked for Aethelred Global for 15 years, Mr. Thorne." She looked at the ascending floor numbers, not at him. "Never once imagined I'd be invited up to the 50th. He turned, offering a small, thoughtful smile. "You might be surprised, Ms. Ramirez, how quickly things can change." He had no inkling then just how profoundly prophetic those words would prove to be, not just for Elena Ramirez, but for himself, and for the entire trajectory of Aethelred Global. The elevator chimed, a delicate sound that seemed to herald a new chapter. Elena stepped out first, her sensible shoes making almost no sound on the antique Persian rug that graced the executive reception area. The air here was different, cooler, scented with something subtle and expensive, a blend of aged leather, freshly brewed artisanal coffee, and the faintest hint of ozone from the state-of-the-art air purifiers. It was the smell of power, if power had a scent. Marcus's executive assistant, a young, impeccably dressed woman named Chloe, looked up from her console, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly at the sight of Elena Ramirez in her teal uniform standing beside the CEO. Marcus offered a curt nod, a silent instruction for them to be undisturbed. Once inside the vast glass-walled expanse of his corner office, with its panoramic views of the Austin skyline, he gestured towards one of the plush leather armchairs facing his imposing mahogany desk. "Please, Mrs. Ramirez, sit." Elena sat, not on the edge of the seat, but with a composed stillness, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her gaze swept the room, not with awe or intimidation, but with a quiet, observant intelligence. She took in the massive, backlit world map dotted with Aethelred's international outposts, the array of gleaming industry awards on a credenza, the framed photos of Marcus with various global dignitaries, the small, personal collection of antique astrolabes on a side table. She wasn't awestruck, merely processing. Marcus settled into his own chair, leaning forward slightly, his earlier surprise now coalescing into a focused intensity. "So, Ms. Ramirez," he began, his voice carefully modulated, "I'll be perfectly candid. This is not a conversation I anticipated having this morning, or ever, if I'm honest." She offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, her posture unwavering, her expression unreadable. "But I just witnessed you navigate 3 complex linguistic interactions with more grace and precision than some of my highly paid international liaisons," he continued. "You switched between Mandarin, Spanish, and French as if you were flipping channels on a television. I need to understand, how does someone with your extraordinary talents end up mopping floors in this building?" For a long moment, Elena didn't answer. Her gaze drifted towards the cityscape beyond the window, then returned to meet his. A faint, wry smile touched her lips. "Do you have time for the long version, Mr. Thorne, or the short, slightly less unbelievable one?" "I believe," Marcus said, leaning back, "I have time for the truth, Ms. Ramirez, whatever its length." She took a slow breath, as if gathering threads from a distant past. "All right, then." She gently rubbed her palms together, a small, unconscious gesture. "I was born in a small town in the Rio Grande Valley. My parents were migrant workers. Then my father got a job as a groundskeeper at a local college. They instilled in me 2 things: the value of hard work and an insatiable curiosity for the world beyond our horizons. Languages. They were my window to that world. I devoured books, listened to foreign radio broadcasts late at night on a crackly old transistor, practiced with anyone who would spare me a moment." She paused, a shadow briefly crossing her features. "I won a scholarship to the University of Texas, majored in comparative linguistics. My dream was to work for the UN or perhaps the Foreign Service. I was top of my class, halfway through a master's program, when my mother fell gravely ill. I came home to care for her. Then my father had a debilitating accident at work. Suddenly, dreams had to take a back seat to survival. Her head tilted slightly, a gesture of quiet reflection. Life, as they say, happened. I had my son, Miguel, a wonderful, bright boy. But I was a single mother. No family support left. The academic world, the diplomatic circles, they felt 1,000,000 miles away. I took any job I could find that allowed me to be there for Miguel. Retail, waiting tables, night shifts at a call center. Eventually, a supervisor at a cleaning agency that contracted with Aethelred offered me a position here. The hours were brutal, but they were consistent. It meant Miguel could go to a good school, that there was food on the table, a roof over our heads. It meant stability. Marcus listened, motionless, his gaze unwavering. The story was a familiar one in its broad strokes, dreams deferred, talent obscured by circumstance, yet the scale of the disconnect between her abilities and her station was staggering. "But the languages," he prompted gently. "You didn't let them go?" A spark ignited in her eyes, a flicker of the passion that hardship had clearly failed to extinguish. "No, sir, never. That was my sanctuary, my mind. I borrowed textbooks from the university library when I could, practiced with language exchange apps, read international newspapers online, listened to podcasts from around the world. It was and is the one thing that is truly mine, the one thing that makes me feel connected, like I still have something valuable to offer, even if no one else sees it." Her voice remained steady, devoid of self-pity. "Most people," she added, a hint of wistfulness in her tone, "they see the uniform. They don't see past it. They just assume." That word, assume, hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Marcus sat back, the weight of her story settling in his chest. He thought of the countless resumes that crossed his desk, the endless parade of MBAs and Ivy League graduates, all polished, all credentialed, all fitting a certain mold. And here was Elena Ramirez, a woman whose intellect and linguistic prowess could rival any of them, a woman who had been silently polishing the edges of his corporate empire for a decade and a half. She cleared her throat softly. "Look, Mr. Thorne, I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm not bitter. Life presents challenges, and you do what you must. I'm proud of the work I do. I'm proud I raised a good son. But you asked, and that's the answer." He exhaled slowly. Elena Ramirez was not just intelligent, she was resilient, possessed of a quiet dignity that was more impressive than any Ivy League pedigree. And she wasn't asking for a handout. She was simply stating her truth. "Have you ever considered," he asked, his mind already racing, "doing something else? Using those languages professionally?" A small, weary shrug. "The thought has crossed my mind, of course, many times. But breaking back in, with no recent corporate experience, no updated certifications, it's daunting. And when you're worried about next month's rent or your son's college tuition, dreams tend to get put on a very high shelf." Silence descended again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Charged, thoughtful, pregnant with unspoken possibilities. Marcus reached for a sleek, leather-bound notebook and a Mont Blanc pen, his movements precise. He began to jot down notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you writing, Mr. Thorne?" Elena asked, her voice still calm, but with a new note of gentle curiosity. He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. A rare, genuine smile spread across his face. "Ideas, Ms. Ramirez. Ideas." And one idea, in particular, was beginning to crystallize in his mind. An idea that was audacious, unconventional, and potentially transformative. That conversation resonated with Marcus throughout the day. a persistent counter-melody to the usual cacophony of boardroom battles and market analyses. Elena Ramirez, 9 languages, 15 years. The sheer, unadulterated waste of talent was a dissonance he couldn't ignore. It pricked at his conscience, but more than that, it ignited a spark of executive excitement. He was a man who recognized value, and the value he had just stumbled upon was immeasurable. Around 3:45 p.m., an unusual time for him to venture from his executive eyrie, Marcus rode the elevator down not to the lobby, but to the building's service level. The air here was warmer, tinged with the faint scent of industrial cleaners and coffee from the staff break room. He navigated the utilitarian corridors, past bustling maintenance workshops and storage rooms, until he found the janitorial supply hub. He spotted Elena through the open doorway. She was meticulously restocking shelves with cleaning supplies, her movements efficient, her focus absolute. "Ms. Ramirez, might I impose on you again?" he asked, stepping into the brightly lit, functional space. She turned, a hint of surprise registering on her face before her customary composure settled back in. "Mr. Thorne, you came down here?" He offered a wry smile. "Our conversation this morning was rather compelling. Listen, I have a somewhat urgent and perhaps unusual favor to ask." She wiped her hands on a clean cloth, her expression attentive. "What kind of favor, sir?" "There's an impromptu meeting upstairs. A key delegation from our new São Paulo initiative arrived a day early. Our primary Portuguese translator called in sick. Food poisoning, apparently. The junior one is struggling. It's critical we make a good impression. Can you help? Can you translate Portuguese?" A small, almost imperceptible pause, then. "Yes, Mr. Thorne, I can." Minutes later, they were entering conference room 12B. 4 Brazilian executives, looking vaguely uncomfortable and exchanging wary glances, sat around a large mahogany table. The junior translator, a nervous young man barely out of college, was visibly flustered. Elena Ramirez stepped into the room, no longer a janitor, but a quiet force. She offered a polite nod to the Brazilians and, without any preamble, began to speak in smooth, articulate, and warmly accented Portuguese. Marcus watched, fascinated, as the entire atmosphere in the room shifted. Shoulders relaxed, expressions softened, genuine smiles appeared. She wasn't just translating words. She was bridging cultural nuances, her intuitive understanding of context and subtext, smoothing over potential misunderstandings. When one of the more boisterous Brazilians cracked a joke, a complex play on words, Elena didn't just translate it. She laughed genuinely and responded with a witty, culturally relevant retort that had the entire Brazilian contingent chuckling appreciatively. Marcus didn't understand a syllable of the exchange, but he understood the language of connection. He understood the power of being truly heard. After nearly an hour, the impromptu meeting concluded, not just successfully, but with a palpable sense of goodwill and mutual respect. As the Brazilians were leaving, their lead negotiator, a distinguished older gentleman, turned to Marcus, clapping him on the shoulder. "Marcus, meu amigo," he said in heavily accented but clear English. "This woman, where did you find her?" "She is magnificent. Better than any professional translator we have ever worked with. She understands not just our words, but our heart." Marcus Thorne looked at Elena Ramirez, who was quietly collecting discarded water bottles and stray papers, her innate sense of order asserting itself. He smiled. "Right here," he said simply. "She was right here all along." In the hallway, as Elena prepared to return to her duties, Marcus caught up with her. "Ms. Ramirez, that was exceptional. Have you done professional translation work before?" She shook her head. "Only informally, sir. Helping out at community centers, hospitals, sometimes for friends navigating bureaucracy. Never officially. No certifications, no agency affiliations. My son, Miguel, he always needed me more than any career path. And Miguel, where is he now? A proud, warm smile illuminated Elena's face. He's 26 now, a software engineer up in Seattle, graduated with honors. He's a good man, a hard worker, stubborn like his mother. They both chuckled, and for a moment the vast gulf between CEO and janitorial staff seemed to vanish, replaced by the simple, shared experience of parental pride. Elena clocked back in at the service level. She still had 2 more floors to meticulously clean before her shift ended. But before Marcus turned to leave, she said something that resonated deeply with him. "Mr. Thorne, I appreciate the opportunity, but I didn't do anything particularly special today. I just spoke." He looked at her, at the quiet dignity that radiated from her, at the immense, untapped potential she embodied. "Ms. Ramirez," he said softly. "From where I was standing, it looked very special indeed." That night, Marcus Thorne sat in his parked car in the quiet of his driveway for a long time before going inside. He thought about the endless corporate initiatives, the diversity seminars, the talent acquisition strategies, the constant search for new blood and untapped markets. And all this time, a veritable goldmine of linguistic and cultural intelligence had been right under his nose, diligently scrubbing away the grime of the previous day. The realization was both humbling and invigorating. The question was no longer if he should act, but how, and how quickly. The next morning, Elena Ramirez's employee badge was unexpectedly flagged when she tried to clock in for her usual pre-dawn shift. Ron, her amiable, slightly world-weary supervisor, approached her with a puzzled expression. "Elena? Mr. Thorne's office called. They want to see you. Again, right away." A flicker of apprehension crossed Elena's face. Did I do something wrong yesterday with the Brazilians?" "I want to create a new position at Aethelred Global," Marcus continued, his gaze direct and unwavering. "A position that, frankly, should have existed years ago. A role this company desperately needs, even if we haven't fully grasped it until now." Her brow furrowed slightly. "A new position? For what, sir?" Ron shrugged, scratching his head. "He didn't say, just said it was important. You better go on up. And Elena, good luck, whatever it is." She washed her hands, smoothed her uniform, and took a deep breath. The journey to the 50th floor felt different this time. People in the elevators, the ones who usually looked right through her, seemed to register her presence. A few even offered hesitant, curious smiles. Whispers followed her down the plushly carpeted executive hallway. Marcus Thorne was standing by his panoramic window, a mug of black coffee in hand, gazing out at the awakening city when Chloe discreetly ushered her in. "Come in, Ms. Ramirez, please," he said, turning, his expression serious, but not unkind. She stood quietly, waiting. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since yesterday," he began, placing his mug on a polished coaster. "About talent, about waste, about how many truly gifted individuals fall through the cracks, not because they lack ability, but because no one is looking in the right places, or looking closely enough." Elena said nothing, her face unreadable. She was a woman who had learned not to trust easy words or sudden changes in fortune. "I want to create a new position at Aethelred Global," Marcus continued, his gaze direct and unwavering. "A position that, frankly, should have existed years ago. A role this company desperately needs, even if we haven't fully grasped it until now." Her brow furrowed slightly. "A new position? For what, sir?" "Cultural liaison and director of international communication. Someone who can seamlessly navigate our diverse global operations. Someone who can speak the languages, yes, but more importantly, understand the nuances, interpret the subtext, build bridges of understanding with our international partners, clients, and even our own overseas staff. Someone who can review sensitive documents, assist in high-level negotiations, vet our translated materials for accuracy and cultural appropriateness, and help us avoid the costly, embarrassing mistakes that arise from miscommunication. Elena's mouth opened slightly, but no sound emerged. You, Ms. Ramirez, Marcus stated, are eminently qualified. More qualified in many respects than half the people on my senior leadership team. You've already demonstrated your abilities under pressure, with grace, intelligence, and remarkable skill. She stared at him, her eyes searching his. Is this real, Mr. Thorne? As real as the view from that window, he affirmed. But I don't have a recent degree, no corporate track record in that field. You have something far more valuable, Ms. Ramirez. 15 years of lived experience within this very organization, an unparalleled command of 9 languages, and a keen understanding of human nature. Do you honestly think a piece of paper from a decade or two ago outweighs that? She shifted her weight, still processing the enormity of his proposal. Why me, Mr. Thorne? There must be others. He smiled, a genuine, almost boyish grin. Because I watched you diffuse 3 potential communication breakdowns in 3 different languages before 9 a.m. yesterday, armed with nothing but your intellect and a spray bottle. And because, Ms. Ramirez, I am tired of this company, of my company, walking past diamonds in the rough, because we're too busy looking for polished stones in predictable places. Elena crossed her arms, a thoughtful, protective gesture. You realize what people will say? The whispers, the resentment? I don't particularly care what they say, Marcus stated firmly. Results speak louder than whispers, and I have a feeling your results will be deafening. A long, charged silence stretched between them. Then, Elena asked softly, her voice laced with a vulnerability that was both poignant and powerful. I've never had an office job before, Mr. Thorne. Not like this. I've never had a title. You'll learn. You're clearly a fast learner. I don't have the wardrobe for this kind of role. HR will arrange a professional clothing allowance. Consider it an investment. A dry, slightly incredulous chuckle escaped her. You seem to have thought of everything. I'm trying to, he admitted. Another pause. Then, the question that spoke volumes about her character. What about my shift downstairs, Mr. Thorne? My colleagues? Who will cover my route? Marcus Thorne's smile was gentle. We'll find someone, Ms. Ramirez. We will manage. But replacing you in this new capacity, that I suspect will be impossible for a very long time. Neither spoke for a long moment. Elena looked down at her hands, then back up at him, her dark eyes shining with a mixture of disbelief, trepidation, and a dawning fierce hope. Are you absolutely certain this isn't some kind of elaborate charity, Mr. Thorne? He shook his head, his expression resolute. This, Ms. Ramirez, is not charity. This is an overdue recognition of extraordinary talent. This is a strategic business decision. And frankly, it's the smartest damn thing I've done all year. She bit her lip, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek before she quickly, almost defiantly, brushed it away. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was firm, imbued with a nascent strength that was breathtaking to witness. All right then, Mr. Thorne, Elena Ramirez said, standing a little straighter. Let's see what I can do. He extended his hand. She took it. Her grip was firm, steady. It wasn't just a handshake. It was a pact. It was the shattering of a glass ceiling no one had even known was there. It was, in its own quiet, revolutionary way, history in the making within the gleaming walls of Aethelred Global. The news of Elena Ramirez's meteoric ascent rippled through Aethelred Global with the speed and impact of a rogue wave. By Wednesday, the janitor who speaks 9 languages and had been handpicked by Thorne himself was the stuff of corporate legend, whispered about in hushed tones in break rooms, speculated upon in Slack channels, and dissected over lukewarm cafeteria salads. Reactions were, predictably, mixed. Some were inspired, seeing it as a testament to hidden potential and a refreshing break from corporate rigidity. Others, particularly those in middle management who had clawed their way up conventional ladders, were skeptical, even resentful. Gregory Vance, the officious head of European operations, a man known for his adherence to protocol and his suspicion of anything unorthodox, was particularly vocal in his private grumblings about Thorne's latest folly. Elena's new office, on the 48th floor, not quite the penthouse but firmly in executive territory, was modest but well appointed. It had a window, a comfortable chair, a brand-new computer she was still tentatively exploring, and a nameplate that read, Elena Ramirez, Director of International Communication and Cultural Liaison. To her, it felt like a landscape on a different planet. Her first official act was to respectfully decline the offer from HR to discard her old teal uniforms. She asked if one could be laundered and kept in her new office closet. A reminder, she explained quietly, of where I've come from and of the value of every single person in this company. Her first major challenge arrived in the form of a thick dossier from Gregory Vance, dropped unceremoniously on her desk. The Q3 quarterly reports from our Milan, Berlin, and Madrid offices, Ms. Ramirez, he'd said, his tone dripping with condescension. They're riddled with inconsistencies, and the translations are problematic. Our teams there are at each other's throats over perceived slights in internal communications. See if your unique skill set can unravel this mess. Elena spent the next 48 hours immersed in those reports. Her new office lights often the last to go out. She didn't just read them. She dissected them, cross-referencing them with local news reports, cultural blogs, and even social media chatter from those regions. She found not just translation errors, but deep-seated cultural misunderstandings embedded in the corporate jargon, misinterpretations of tone, and a fundamental lack of empathy in the cross-office communications. By Friday, she had produced a concise, brilliantly insightful report of her own, not only identifying the linguistic and cultural tripwires, but also proposing clear, actionable solutions, including revised communication protocols and targeted cultural sensitivity training modules she subtly hinted she could help develop. She delivered it to Vance, and for good measure, CC'd Marcus Thorne. Vance was stunned into a rare silence. Thorne, on reading it, summoned her to his office. Elena, he said, dispensing with the formality of Ms. Ramirez for the first time. This is extraordinary. You've not only diagnosed the illness, but prescribed the cure. How did you— Mr. Thorne, she replied, a hint of her old, quiet smile playing on her lips. For 15 years I've listened. People talk differently when they think no one of consequence is paying attention. I learned a lot about this company from the ground up, literally. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Elena became an indispensable asset. She smoothed ruffled feathers with disgruntled French suppliers, deciphered the nuanced legalese of a complex Japanese partnership agreement, and even helped the marketing team avoid a potentially disastrous, culturally insensitive advertising campaign for the Middle Eastern market. She did it all with her characteristic quiet competence, deflecting praise and focusing on the work. She started small, informal language lunches in the company cafeteria, where employees from different backgrounds could practice conversational Spanish or German. She began mentoring a shy young intern from Vietnam, helping him gain confidence in his English presentation skills. The Ramirez effect, as some started to call it, was subtle but transformative. One afternoon, Marcus found her in the newly christened Elena Ramirez Global Communications Hub, formerly a dusty, underused library, helping a group of junior executives prepare for a trade mission to South Korea. I've been thinking, Marcus said, watching her patiently explain a point of Korean business etiquette. This company has so much untapped internal talent. People in roles where their full potential is never seen, let alone utilized. We need a program, a formal way to identify and nurture these hidden gems. Elena looked up, her eyes bright. I have a few ideas about that, Mr. Thorne. And so, the Aethelred Ascend Initiative was born, a program spearheaded by Elena Ramirez, designed to provide mentorship, skills training, and cross-departmental exposure to employees in non-executive roles. Its motto, coined by Elena herself, was simple: talent has no title. A hush fell over the room. The greatest resource any company possesses, she continued, her gaze sweeping across the assembled executives, is not its patents, its properties, or its profit margins. It is its people, all of its people. The talent you seek, the innovation you crave, the loyalty you desire, might be standing right beside you, wearing a different uniform, holding a different tool, speaking a different native tongue. My story is not unique because of what I can do. It is unique, perhaps, because someone finally saw. She spoke of the value of curiosity, of the courage to look beyond assumptions, of the profound impact of seeing and acknowledging the inherent worth in every individual. She didn't speak of her own hardships with bitterness, but as a testament to resilience. So, I ask you today, she concluded, her voice ringing with quiet passion, when you return to your offices, to your teams, to your daily routines, look closer, listen deeper, ask the unexpected questions, because the person mopping your floor, serving your coffee, or delivering your mail might just hold the key to your company's next great breakthrough. They might be the multilingual genius, the untapped innovator, the future leader you've been searching for. All you have to do is see them. The silence that followed was profound, almost reverent. Then it erupted, a standing ovation, thunderous and sustained, not just for the director of international communication, but for Elena Ramirez, the woman who had reminded a global corporation that its most valuable assets were often hidden in plain sight, waiting only for the vision to recognize them and the courage to elevate them. Marcus Thorne, watching from the wings, felt a swell of pride that had little to do with stock prices or market share. He had indeed made the smartest damn decision of his career, and it had nothing to do with balance sheets and everything to do with humanity. The shock waves from Elena's discovery were still reverberating, but now they were waves of positive, transformative change, reshaping Aethelred Global from the inside out. What an incredible journey, right? Has Elena's story resonated with you? Have you ever witnessed hidden talent bloom in an unexpected place, or perhaps felt your own potential was unseen? We'd love to hear your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. If stories like this uplift, inspire, and make you think, please show your support by hitting that subscribe button and ringing the notification bell. You won't want to miss the powerful narratives we have coming up. Thanks for watching, and remember, brilliance is everywhere. Sometimes you just need to look.